We have an awesome guest here with us today for our SUMO Social Friday meeting. This is Mike Kaply. He is here to talk to you about some previewing for the Firefox CSR product. We've got Roland here and Philip here to talk about the Firefox products. And Sylvian, uh, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Thank you for joining us. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves to those watching the recording and kind of give an idea of what y'all do for the project?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Mike Kaply. I've been involved in the Mozilla project for many years since it began, but I've been working with Mozilla for a couple years now, and my primary role is to work with our partners in terms of doing distribution, but I'm also well known for doing enterprise work before and now, and so I've been working on the team that has been building our first stab at enterprise support into Firefox.
Cool.
I'm gonna tag you, Roland.
I think, first of all, I'd like to state that I think Mike is understating his excellence and his knowledge of Firefox and Enterprise. He wrote, did you write CCK?
Yes.
Yeah, he wrote, because Mozilla wouldn't support it, he wrote his own thing to make Enterprise work better called CCK, and I know that's about all I know. But yeah, he has a depth of knowledge about this stuff that few people do. I'm Roland. I'm a SUMO analyst, the only SUMO analyst, and I analyze in terms of support every single product. I with Joni Savage, I make sure the documents are correct for every product, for every release, and look at the forums a little bit, look at Google Play Store. I'm supposed to only work on mobile, but we need more people. But that's another story. So that's me. And Philip, or Sylvain, I don't know who wants to.
Yeah, I'll take over. So I'm a long-term contributor in support, answering Firefox desktop questions in the forum, and since a couple of years also volunteering for release management in terms of monitoring stability, rates and trends, and escalating issues we see with other users. Yeah, then I'll hand over to Sylvain.
Yes, my name is Sylvain. I'm a volunteer for reviewing add-ons on the AMO team. And I'm here today just as I'm a little bit curious about Mike's policy engine for 60.
Great.
Hey, I'm Rachel. I'm just a SUMO community manager, and I'll be your host, and I'll be facilitating this meeting. If you have any questions, or if any of you start talking over one of each other, I might give you a little nudge, but all in good fun. It looks like we have Constance Slayer. Thank you for joining us. Apparently we're also live on YouTube, so I might stutter a little bit now because I didn't realize our reach. But without further delay, we had a chance to post in the forums a couple of questions for the community, just to anticipate some of the new changes in the product. Thank you very much for your help with that, Philip, with all the new features that are coming to Firefox. Do you want to give us a kind of a brief overview, or maybe Roland as well, some of the features that you're looking forward to most in Firefox 60?
You mean besides Enterprise, which we'll talk about shortly? I'll let Philip talk because he knows.
Yeah, or we could jump right into Enterprise if that is the majority vote. I'm happy to do that too. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm not sure if there are many top-level add-ons in 60 otherwise.
Okay, we'll jump right into it then. So what would you say, I've been hearing this thing about policy engine. Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about what awesome things that the policy engine can do in Firefox CSR?
Sure. So traditionally, when people use computers at companies and schools, those places want to do some level of locking down Firefox. Now, most people don't think about, they don't want their browser controlled and things like that. But in certain environments, you need to have things done a certain way. So maybe you need to not have private browsing, or you need to set a certain homepage or install certain search engines or make sure add-ons are available. So what we built, we're calling the policy engine. It's a generic service inside of Firefox that allows you to set up policies. So we have a list of about 50 policies that you can do within Firefox. You can, and certain sites always allow pop-ups. You can preload add-ons. You can uninstall add-ons. You can make some add-ons so they can't be added or removed. You can add search engines. You can block websites. So the kind of things that somebody might want to do inside of a school, company, that kind of thing. And then on top of that, so we built this policy engine as the underlying technology. Now, the primary way of managing policy on Windows is something called group policy. And so on Windows, there are tools that are already built where an administrator can say, I can go through a user interface and decide what they want and don't want for their users. And then it automatically writes those things to the Windows registry. And then when Firefox starts up, it reads those things from the registry, and that happens automatically. So we built the policy engine as kind of the core thing in Firefox that understands how to manage policies. And we built a generic mechanism for that to work on any platform, where you just put a JSON file with your policies in a specific location. And then for Windows specifically, we've enabled group policies. So anybody that uses Windows local group policy or Active Directory is what it's called, what typical companies use to administer this, can configure Firefox for their organization. And when their users use Firefox, it will have those things applied. And we've already started getting responses from folks that are just excited about this technology, because it's been something that people have been asking for genuinely for since the very first version of Mozilla, not even Firefox. So this is something that's been requested for, over 15, 16 years.
Wow, that's really amazing. I can't even imagine the different types of the different types of setups that you can have for Firefox, and I can only imagine like a bunch of big flock of droids coming in with the Firefox CSR, and maybe droids is the wrong vision, but like a very large network of computers. Roland, you're raising your hand.
Oh yeah, Mike, can you repeat the sentence about Windows? This applies to Windows, Mac, and Linux, but you said
so on Windows,
Mac, and
only? Linux, we've created a generic way.
Right.
Mac does have a way to manage that we don't support yet. So we've created a way that you can drop in a file into Mac, Linux, or Windows, and it will do the management.
Right.
But on Windows, they have this thing called group policy, where they actually have a user interface, and you build these things called ADM templates. And these templates, they install on their Windows machine. An administrator would do this, and then they can configure exactly what they want the user to have, and Windows takes care of adding those entries to the registry. And so then when Firefox starts up, it reads those from the registry. So on Windows, we can go a step further than just having you put this JSON file down to configure Firefox. We actually can use the operating system's designed mechanisms for doing management.
Okay, which is called, what's it called again?
It's called group policy. The terms you'll typically hear is you'll hear it called group policy. You'll also hear the term Active Directory. What Active Directory is it's the mechanism that those policies are sent to the user. So when somebody logs into Windows, they log into Active Directory. Their machine goes, asks Active Directory, I'm Mike, and what policy should I have? And then Active Directory sends those policies down to the machine. And then when Firefox starts up, it reads those policies so that it can configure itself properly when it started.
Okay. And Mac Firefox CSR doesn't use the Mac only feature.
No, so Macs have a very unique mechanism for doing enterprise customization involving plist files, and we know about that technology. It's not as easy to implement as the Windows group policy was, but it's definitely on our roadmap for doing better Mac support. We have a solution, but there's more that we can do, and we're investigating that.
But for now, it's the generic solution for Mac and Linux. Okay.
Yes.
I have a quick question, Mike, for you. What are can someone go in similar to the old Mozilla config file and lock any of the about config config entries? Is there a limit to any of those, or?
So we made a conscious decision when we started building this. So let me back up a little bit. Most group policy solutions that were built by external parties, the way they work is they just allowed you to arbitrarily lock any preference. So they didn't really provide a lot of other interesting things like turning off private browsing or installing add-ons. All they could really do is lock preferences. When we went to build this solution, we didn't want to give people the ability to just arbitrarily lock any preference. And the reason is because we want to understand why people are doing what they're doing. So what we chose to do is pick a set of preferences that we know are important for people to set. Things like being able to use Windows certificates, being able to set NTLM domains, being able to do sanitize on shutdown. So we picked things that we know people use. And what we're doing is we're asking the community and the enterprise community, what are we missing? Like, are there other preferences that are important for you to set, and why? Because what we've learned is that a lot of people set a lot of preferences in Firefox, and a lot of times either they don't know why they're setting them, they've just always set them. So maybe they don't exist anymore, maybe they don't need to be set. And our goal is to hopefully build policies for the top, 50 preferences so that people can set them that way. But we're planning to leave auto config in place specifically to lock preferences. If people discover that there are preferences that we don't support in the group policy, they'll be able to continue to use auto config to set preferences. Over time, we're going to continue to evaluate that and decide if we've reached a point where using something like auto config is unnecessary because we've covered the bulk of it, or at some point we might make a decision and say, you know what, it just makes sense for us to allow arbitrary preferences in group policy, and we could consider doing that as well. But we didn't want to come out of that out of the gate because the concern would be that everybody would just use that mechanism, and we wouldn't get a good sense of what preferences we need to add to group policy to make it easier for everybody to use it.
Okay.
By the way, I use group policy and policy manager interchangeable, but whenever I say group policy, I mean the policy manager. None of this is unique to Windows group policy.
I was going to ask a dumb question. If I have 3 Macs or 3 Windows machines at home, can I use this?
So on Mac and Linux, you can absolutely use it easily. So you could use this as a parent to configure your child's machine. So on Windows, it's a little trickier because group policy support is generally only available in Windows Professional. So if you have Windows Professional, you can use it. If you were to search on the internet for adding local group policy to Windows Home, there are people that talk about how to do that. It's not something I've done because I have a Windows Professional machine, but the answer to your question is there are people that have added what's called local group policy to Windows. And yes, you absolutely can use this. As a matter of fact, a funny story, like I use my Windows machine to do testing, and I'll be adding group policy, and then I'll go to run Firefox, and I'm like, why can't I get to about config? Oh, because I accidentally set group policy on my local machine. So yes, you absolutely can use this. So a parent could even use this to disable.
But you have to run Windows Professional on all the machines, is what you're saying?
Or you have to research how to add group policy support to Windows Home. So it is out there. It's not hard. It's just you add a couple files to Windows. It's just not something I've done, but it certainly is possible.
Okay. But you have to Google it. Okay.
That's a distinction, by the way, that we have away from Chrome. So Chrome only allows certain group policies if you're connected to an Active Directory server, so you can't use local group policy. Our solution for that is that some policies are only available on the ESR, and all policies are on the ESR. There are a few policies that are not allowed on rapid release. And those policies are specifically around things that a hijacker could take advantage of, like changing your search engine, installing add-ons. So we had to draw a line in the sand and say, these are things that it's too easy to do by just changing registry entries, so we'll only allow them on ESR.
So there are differences once ESR 60 comes out.
Yes, specifically around policies that will not work. And we are being, the release notes will explain exactly what policies are not available on rapid release. But that's going to, the primary difference between rapid release and ESR and 60 are we continue to not require signatures for add-ons. as in you can turn it off on ESR. And the other new change is that we're going to have certain policies that will only be available on ESR, specifically to prevent hijacking.
Okay, that'll be in the release notes.
Awesome. So it sounds like we're talking a little bit about a new type of audience, and you're talking a lot about different types of policies. So for users that are coming to the forums, how will users know, how will a contributor or someone who's trying to help these people coming to the forums know that someone has this policy on their install of Firefox?
So yeah, if you have somebody come to the forum and they're having a problem doing something, and you're curious if they are having a policy is preventing something, there's really a couple things to check. If a preference has been set via the policy manager, when you go to the preferences, there's a message at the top of the preferences dialog that says some of your preferences are being managed. And so that's a way to immediately tell that a user is in a managed environment.
So just to be clear, that's about preferences or tools options on Windows.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. In any preferences dialog, it'll be at the top. So it's not specific to doing about preferences. That's correct. The other thing is, if they're trying to go somewhere, like you might tell them to modify a preference in about config, and when they go to about config, it'll say blocked, this page is not available to you. It's been blocked by your administrator. So that's how you'll know is there's a couple different user interface elements. The other thing I'll point out is, in terms of knowing whether or not somebody is using the ESR or not, if you need that information, we are changing the about dialog a little bit. Whereas before it said Firefox ESR and there was actually an image. Now what it's going to say is the words extended support release will be in text under the Firefox logo. So that's how you will know that somebody's using the ESR. When they go to the about dialog, it will stay extended support release. Under
about Firefox or whatever it's called.
No, well, about. When you go to the about dialog, it's on the about dialog.
Okay. All right. So what was it? Help. I'm using Windows. Help.
Yeah.
About Firefox.
About Firefox. Yep.
Okay.
What's the relation between the label Firefox for Enterprise and Firefox ESR?
Firefox for Enterprise is really a marketing thing. So when we worked with the marketing team, we wanted to come up with a way to tell people about this, but we knew we weren't going to create a separate product line. So we're using the phrase Firefox Enterprise primarily to just say that we're available for enterprise. The important thing to realize is that the ESR stands for Extended Support Release, and it's primarily about how long the browser is supported. We would encourage enterprises to use Firefox Rapid Release or the ESR, whatever is best for their needs. We don't steer enterprises one way or the other, except in the case where they need those additional policies. So when you think about the ESR, especially as it relates to 60, it's really about the kind of people that need something that's stable for long periods of time. A lot of times schools are really an example of this. A school typically does not upgrade systems during the school year. They do a lot of their upgrades over the summer or the break, different breaks. So they can't have a browser where the user interface is changing every 6 weeks, which can happen with Firefox, right? You can see major changes every 6 weeks. So a lot of times what they want is something that's a little more stable so that they can decide when they want to do the major upgrades. So again, when we think of ESR, we don't think of it as an enterprise thing. It's about a longer release cycle, and enterprises are free to choose either. And one of the SUMO articles we've created is specifically about that subject. It's how does an enterprise choose whether to use the ESR or rapid release. So if anybody asks that question, I've written an article that kind of helps them understand why they should pick one over the other. So again, Firefox for Enterprise or Enterprise Firefox is purely a marketing term that we're using right now to tell folks that we are enterprise ready on Firefox.
But the thing you will be downloading, if you choose to use ESR, will still be called ESR in 60 timeframe.
Yes. We are not using the term enterprise in any of our products. It's only being used in marketing.
Marketing and SUMO and communication.
Marketing SUMO, yeah. It's not in physical products. It's only in documentation and user-facing stuff when we're trying to distinguish. Because there's a second problem which we'll get to, which is that we're really going to try to encourage enterprise users to go to the enterprise space on SUMO so that they can get very specialized help. So that's why we want the enterprise folks to go there so that all of those topics don't get mixed into the regular Firefox. So that, and what we're gonna do is when people ask questions that are more generic for just general Firefox questions, we want to steer those away from the enterprise forum, because we really want the enterprise forum to where people get asked questions about deploying and customizing Firefox. That's really what it's focused on.
Okay, so question then. Sorry, I'm monopolizing all the questions, Philip, Sylvain, and Constance Slayer. Question. If my school organization decides to use rapid release, i.e. the normal Firefox, then I won't be able to block everything, correct? Or can I enable the blocking of everything that I can block?
No, you will not be able to block everything. There will be certain things you will not be able to do. You will not be able to set the homepage.
So there is that difference. They have to be aware of that.
And and in the page about choosing a release, we talk about the policy differences. We're investigating making those policies available on rapid release by doing some checking to make sure you're on Active Directory and things like that. But and there's a possibility we might not do that for Mac and Linux because we don't really have hijacking problems on Mac and Linux. But right now we wanted to have a really consistent message which says if you need these specific policies, you're going to need to use the ESR.
So which article do I look for to see what policies are not implemented in rapid release?
There's an article that talks about choosing a release cycle, and I don't remember if I call out the specific policies in that document or whether I point to another document that has them.
Or is that in the release notes?
I'll go ahead and list those policies in that document.
Okay. It's not in the release notes. Okay, probably it's too complicated.
I don't know how detailed the release notes is going to be. We've given to them the list of the policies, but I don't know yet whether they're going to actually spell out those policies in the release notes.
But they're not, I guess the word is, they're not, it is conceivable that I as a school administrator or I as a company administrator could say, oh, rapid release is actually better for our needs. We can deal with not being able to block those policies.
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. So I think there was another question that was put in here that might have some themes around community. So you mentioned that would be pointing users to a specific category in SUMO forums for questions about Firefox for Enterprise. And please interrupt me if we're missing any questions before we jump. I know conversations are awesome when they jump around. But I guess the first question that I have here is around moderation and contact, I guess more generalized contact information. So there's moderating, moving questions from one to the other, as well as sort of who will be answering questions and sort of the how to contribute to that part of the forum. Can you kind of give us an idea of some of the expectations for how that'll work in the forums itself, or maybe that's a more general question. So sure. The question is how will moderating work, and who's going to be the main contact for that?
Right now, I'm going to be the main contact for the Firefox Enterprise. We're going to work within our enterprise community to see if we can raise up some other folks that are helpful on our enterprise mailing list to see if they want to participate. But my plan is that I will probably be a lot of the support initially, and we're going to start bringing people up. But I would love to have other community members that are interested in these subjects to participate if they want to. I mean, there's a lot of interesting, information around enterprise, and it's a really interesting topic. And honestly, a lot of the stuff we're doing it's not really high tech. It's not really complicated. It's just kind of interesting. I think the biggest thing that I feel like when working with enterprise and talking enterprise, and this is hard for some people, is getting past the personal belief that you disagree with what a company is choosing to do. And I know that sounds weird, but there are a lot of people that in their work environment and in the way they live and work, it doesn't occur to them that they would ever need to limit things. And so when somebody comes in and says, well, I need to turn on private browsing, your attitude can't be, well, why would you want to not allow private browsing to employees. You know, and some people, that's the way they think. The attitude has to be, I understand you have that requirement. Let's help you figure out how to make that happen. You know what I mean? So sometimes you can be a little, I've seen this in the past where people tend to discount the requirements that administrators have because they don't understand that there are legal requirements and all kinds of other reasons why somebody would have to customize their Firefox a certain way. So you really have to expect that you know, we're just going to try to help you get the thing accomplished that you need to get accomplished, because I don't know why you need to do that specific thing, but I'll understand that there's probably somebody telling you that needs to be done, and so we're going to work to try to make that work. So, but I think that's
so
going to be
in the era, that's why that was a philosophical question I was going to ask. Like I used to be one of those people. Now I get it, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah.
But in an era of bring your own device.
That's a great
I
question.
bring my own Windows Home professional laptop to the office. Could administrator override me, or I have to deliberately bring my own Windows laptop?
No, so typically in a bring your own device situation, when you get to work, you're going to log into the Active Directory server.
Oh,
like
so that's at that point you're subject to
your
it.
Policies are going to be applied. So that's a really great question, the bring your own device situation. So most companies, what they're building is they're building out solutions that still manage the things as necessary. In general, though, if you're in the bring your own device world and you know, if you meet anybody that's doing that, you really want to read the agreement that you make with your company when you do a bring your own device. Like I have a friend who's
that helps a lot.
His phone, the agreement he signed was that his company can remotely erase his entire phone in exchange for him using his phone for work. So it's bring your own device can actually be problematic if you don't really pay attention to what you're doing. But the answer to your question is that's how we handle bring your own device is people usually log in at work and then those policies are applied. Whereas when they're at home, they're not logged in and those policies are not applied.
Cool. So you could do private browsing at home when you're not logged into the Active Directory. Okay, weird. Oh, that's confusing, but powerful.
Yep.
That's a really interesting philosophical approach to, you know, how you browse the web and when you're browsing the web in different environments. So that actually brings me to our next question is, you have an article in the MDN ESR, in the MDN website that points people to the ESR mailing list. For those that are the more from what I gather, MDN is a kind of a developer audience, more technical audience. How do you see both administrators and users using sort of the two different articles, and which type of user should we be pointing people to which one?
Okay, so my plan is to move all the MDN content over to SUMO. So we kind of have a problem here at Mozilla that nobody talks about, which is that there's this middle of the road article that never had a good home. So we have, as MDN became more web documentation focused and SUMO is more support focused, there's questions like, well, where does documentation about, you know, building add-ons go? And where does documentation about enterprise go? And does it go on the wiki? Does it go here? So we've never really had a home per se. But now that we have a home on SUMO, my plan within the next few weeks is that we're going to redirect all of the MDN content that we can over to SUMO, and we're going to remove all of the enterprise content from MDN. And we're going to redirect wiki.mozilla.org enterprise over to SUMO. So our long-term plan is to have SUMO be the home for all of our enterprise content. So I'm going to remove all of that content and really use SUMO. So I've already written a handful of articles, and I'm going to go through and see what more content we can move from MDN and point to SUMO. So I really want everybody to go to SUMO to get all the content.
Would you expect the enterprise mailing list to live along the support forum?
The enterprise mailing list is going to stay alone. We're not going to modify the enterprise mailing list. You're going to see me more and more when people ask questions. I'm going to respond with things like, if this is something that you can talk about publicly, please ask your question here. Primarily because the problem with the mailing list is questions get answered and then they get left in the archives of the mailing list, which are impossible to search. And so I'd rather see the solutions we answer people, I'd rather see them happen inside of a public forum. So yeah, I'm going to be actively encouraging people on the mailing list to go to SUMO for questions.
Okay, and you're going to leave the mailing list as a place for specialized and semi-private discussions.
Specialized and semi-private. And semi-private is the correct term there, because we don't give anybody an indication that it's a private communication. Anybody can join.
Yeah.
So it's not considered a place for confidential information. But
yeah,
I think
it's security by obscurity, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why.
But the other thing the enterprise working group gives is a place for people to discuss things, which is still not a thing that SUMO's an appropriate place for, where people like a couple of weeks ago, everybody was having a rant about I don't remember. It was something about we're changing a feature and nobody liked it and they wanted to rant. And you know what? If they want to rant about that on the enterprise mailing list, great. That's the place to do that. We don't have a place within Mozilla that's good for those kind of rants. So
well, the other thing is because the other thing is discourse. We do have discourse. That is an alternative to the mailing list if that works for you better than the mailing list.
And we long term we might think about whether we set up some enterprise stuff on discourse. I'm going to be curious to see how much of our enterprise traffic moves over to SUMO in terms of the questions.
Awesome. Probably want to get in contact with administrators of discourse before 20 people there, but it is a great piece of software for notifications. The next question we have, since we're talking about where to point people, there's a question. I think what's happening right now is as the articles get moved in, they show up on the dashboard for localizers, and there's a couple of questions about pontoon strings. There's a couple of variations of Firefox for Enterprise or policies for Firefox Enterprises for pluralization. I don't know who makes the final decision on the strings that get entered into pontoon, but if you're open to feedback, we've got a couple of questions there for clarification.
To be clear, these are the strings for localizing the software that powers support.mozilla.org, which is known as Kitsune. Am I right?
Yeah, the labels and the different strings on the website.
Yep. So yeah, I've already had some communication. I think there's the main thing that the Firefox for Enterprise is the moniker we're using. I don't want to call it Enterprise Firefox. We really want to call it Firefox for Enterprise. So that's the terminology. And in terms of the policies, whenever I use the term, they're policies for Firefox. So I know there's been a little bit of confusion, but I have to go back and look a little more at the way the wording goes. But the way we're characterizing it in the topics is there's policies, which is a general concept.
Yeah.
So it's not even specific to Firefox. We're talking about the concept of policies, and so that's the name of, I think, one of the subjects. And then the other general topics we're talking about is installation, customization. So it might even be worthwhile to make those concepts, to remove some of the branding out of those topics. So maybe the overall topic should be Firefox for Enterprise, and then the subtopic should be installing, customizing, deploying, and then just a general policy topic. We might want to go in and try to clean those up so it's simpler to use terminology for those. So we could certainly do that, look into that.
Since German is a very popular language within Mozilla, and one of our second most strategic language, I guess, next to English. Do we have a formal translation to German? I'm just curious, because if we have set a precedent with German, then we can apply it to everybody else.
No, at this point, we're not doing any translations. So the group policy files that are available on Windows can be translated pretty easily. They're XML files, but we have not at this point decided.
Oh, they're all in English.
Yeah. And the reason is, to be honest, this was a quick project. It was a couple months. We're kind of getting out there. We're hoping that the response for this is going to be very positive, and that's going to be a direction that's going to define the direction that we go forward with more features. But this was, it was a really small team that worked really hard to make this happen. And our real focus was just on getting something into 60 as fast as possible. We really put this together in a very short amount of time, and Felipe Gomez on our team did an outstanding job of building this. And so we're excited about what it came together, but in order to make that happen, it had to be fast. And so that means that we have the potential for translation, but nothing's been done yet.
So, okay, great. So you actually, you and your team actually wrote code for this. This was not just activating features that we have.
No, we had to actually write code
before.
in Firefox to enable policies because.
So there could be bugs, is my point.
Yes, there could be. It's been thoroughly tested by the test team.
Yeah.
The main feedback we've been getting so far is basically people want more policies. So what you're going to see over the next few weeks is we're going to be adding policies. And that's one other thing I want to point out while we're talking about that. Typically, our ESR releases, that's redundant, our ESR only gets updates for security and crashes and regressions. We're adding a new category to that. When we add new policies to Firefox, we're going to allow them in the ESR. Because we didn't want, if we added new policies, we didn't want people to have to wait a year to get those new policies. So in addition to security fixes, crashes, regressions, if we build a new policy for Firefox 61, it's going to be in the ESR 60.1.
Right.
So we're not going to, so we're going to allow that within the ESR.
Yeah.
So how would you like to see new policies proposed to the Firefox for them, or?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that. You cut off.
How would you best like new policies to be proposed by users to have?
We have a GitHub repository for the templates where people can add issues, and that's how a lot of them come in. Or they can just open Bugzilla bugs in the enterprise policies component and request, and we'll discuss how to do that. So far, the ones that have come in, I've been very straightforward requests, and they make sense, so we're probably going to add pretty much all of them. It's very lightweight to add new policies, especially if they're changing just preferences. Those are really easy, and I don't feel like I need a ton of people telling me something's required in order to add it, because the interesting thing about this world, right, is if I enable a policy, it might allow a company to deploy 100,000 copies of Firefox. So it's easy to justify adding a simple policy if it means that we're going to get Firefox on a lot more desktops.
You mentioned a little bit about there will be different features for the enterprise or the ESR branch out with releases going forward. Is that something we can talk about or ask about? Are those features coming down the pipeline, or is this maybe I'm asking for Christmas before Christmas comes?
I can tell you some of the policies we're already staging right now. We have an intern starting next week who's going to start building them. Some of the things we missed is policies for turning off geolocation, turning off notifications, turning off microphone. So we're going to add policies for that. One of the policies people ask for is add an extra help menu item for their internal support. So we're going to add a policy so you can easily add a new menu item that goes to your internal support. I'm trying to think. There were a few more preferences, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. But those are the main ones that are coming down. Is more permissions, and some additional UI to add in support. So those are the ones we've got teed up right now. And we're expecting that the moment this goes out of the gate, we're going to get tons of people saying, "Oh, I needed this. I needed this." You know, I had the CCK2 as a backdrop for what I know people had asked for in the past in terms of what they need to customize. So we use that to build the policy engine, and I think we got about 80 to 90% of what I'd done in the CCK. And so I think we're going to meet most of the need coming out. And our hope is that within the next 1 to 2 releases, we'll be able to fill in enough of the gaps to really feel like we covered what people are looking for.
Awesome.
Will the new policies? Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Will they jump the release train, or kind of will they be uplifted?
The way they're going to work is the policies are going to be dropped into. The way I'm planning it is the first 2 weeks of a release cycle, we can drop new policies into that release. and then those policies get uplifted to beta and then to the ESR in that same level. So basically the first 2 weeks of any release cycle are open for policies. And the reason we're doing it that way is so that we don't uplift to ESR or beta late in their cycles. So for starting next week, for the next 2 weeks is basically going to be our open season on writing new policies, and then we'll have another few weeks to test them and make sure they're good. Because we're putting things on the ESR, we don't want to do anything late in the cycle because we can. It's really now this stuff is going to be really self-contained, and the rule is going to be if the policies require changes to Firefox, then we're probably not going to allow them. But most of these changes are not about changing Firefox core code. They're about adding code to the policy engine to change new preferences, add new permissions. So, but if somebody comes up with a policy and says, well, this policy needs to change these 20 Firefox things, then odds are it's not going to make it into Firefox. But if it's something very simple that we're doing, then it can make it in.
That asked, I sort of know about CCK, but could you give a brief explanation of what CCK is, and will be going forward?
Sure. So originally, the CCK was built by Netscape for doing customization many, many years ago. And so I use that name for my CCK2, which is essentially a tool that provides a wizard that a user, an administrator can walk through the wizard and say, I want to set this and turn off this and do this. And then it generates a zip file at the end that they can install into Firefox, and it preloads all the customizations. And the reason I did that was because at the time, Mozilla didn't have any enterprise solution. So what I built was kind of, it's a hack. I mean, that's what it is. It's a hack to get enterprise features into Firefox. It worked really well, but it's a hack. Now I am going to support CCK for Firefox 60. I've already finished up the code for that. It'll be released either today or early next week. So, but I'm going to be actively discouraging people from using the CCK and encouraging them to use our new policy engine. I understand there are people that are going to continue to use it, and we don't have a problem with that. But some of the mechanisms that it uses to do what it does are going to be slowly going away in Firefox. So there's going to be no guarantee that the CCK will work, with the next level ESR or in any near future. So we're going to be very conscious of the fact that while it works now, I can't guarantee that it will always work. But it's going to still be available. In order to run the wizard, it's an old style extension that can't be ported to web extensions. So you'll have to use Firefox 52 to run the wizard, but the file that it generates will work on Firefox 60.
Okay.
And there's some discussion going forward of creating a nice user interface around generating this JSON file as well. There have been some contributors that have showed interest in building like a web extension or a web app that generates the JSON file. I have no plans to make the CCK2 generate the policy file because they're really not the same. I don't want to conflate the two in anybody's eyes. The CCK2 is its own thing that does something that was needed until we had policy support. But now that we have policy support, we would encourage everybody to use the what we built.
Is it an add-on then? A non-web extension add-on?
Yes. The wizard itself is, and then it generates a zip file that you can unzip into Firefox to do the customizations.
Cool, which is compatible with everything.
Yes.
For now. So you're basically 60 is the last hurrah for 60 is ESR 60 cycle. That's the last hurrah for.
I'm not saying that, but there's a strong possibility that it will be.
I'm just trying to TLDR what you just said.
Yeah, that's going to be the general message that I will be communicating with the next few days on my blog. Is that the CCK2 is on its way out. Some of the technologies the CCK2 uses will also be going away on rapid release in particular, a technology called autoconfig that we use. We're going to leave behind autoconfig for setting preferences, but the way the CCK2 works is that it can break out of the CCK2 or the autoconfig sandbox and do a lot of stuff. And what we're discovering is that malware authors and adware authors are using autoconfig to do evil things. And so it's going to be sandbox. And so if when we sandbox it, it means the CCK2 won't work either. Now, we're not planning to sandbox it on the ESR yet, but if we see abuse on the ESR by these adware folks, then we will consider sandboxing autoconfig on ESR as well, and that will guarantee that the CCK2 will not work on ESR. But that's nothing that would happen before 67.
Okay, so I'm confused. So I thought autoconfig would work in the near future, but you're saying
No. Let me be clear. Autoconfig will work, but it will be sandboxed. So when autoconfig was originally designed, it could only do a handful of things. It could set preferences, it could lock preferences, and that's about all it could do. But at some point, somebody made changes so that autoconfig had full access behind the scenes to everything inside of Firefox. So it essentially is an add-on. And so I exploited that ability to build the CCK2 to do interesting things. But the problem is once we switched to web extensions, malware authors started using that capability as well to do evil things. So what we're looking at is in Firefox 62, we're going to go from the ESR being, or the autoconfig being able to do everything, to reducing it to this small set of original APIs that it could do, just setting preference. So it will still be there, but it will have a much smaller sandbox that it can play in.
So is autoconfig your escape hatch if you don't have the right policies for now? It's
yes.
like your, but what you should do as an administrator is say, I used these, flag it to the mailing list or to SUMO
exactly.
Forum. Say, I use these policies with autoconfig. Could you please add them as official policies so I don't have to use
and that's a great terminology, escape hatch. That's a great way to put it. Basically, if you get to a point where there's things you need to do and you can't do it with our policies, you can do it with autoconfig, but please tell us so that we can add it to autoconfig, because our goal is to make the overlap so small that you don't need to use autoconfig. We really want to make policies available or understand why you're setting a particular policy so we can figure out if there's a reason that you're doing things a certain way. But that's what autoconfig is going to be really for at this point, is for those things that you couldn't figure out how to do via policies. But like I said, we want to make everything available via policies that's necessary.
Great.
Got it. So it might be a workaround for those that for the policies that are not included in Policy Engine to use the sandbox autoconfig. Okay.
Yep.
That's tricky. Thank you.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, you know, the sad part is I've seen a company use the CCK2 itself to build adware, which made me so mad. Somebody was having problems when I looked into it. Somebody had taken the CCK2 and used it to build bad things. So the problem is, this is why we can't have nice things, because anything we build, somebody will figure out a way to do something evil with. And in this situation, the evil stuff they do is the stuff that ends up on SUMO, right? It's people, you know, why can't I change my search engine? Why is my homepage set to this? It's because they figured out ways to use autoconfig to do that. And so even though by getting rid of legacy extensions, we made things better, these companies are figuring out other clever ways to work around the things that we built. And so essentially, we're just continuing to put up roadblocks to try to solve the problem.
I assume Mr. Stefan asked the MSI question.
Okay, so the MSI question is going to continue to come up, and you'll get those questions. And my standard response is going to be, when we looked at what people are doing, MSI or group policy was absolutely the most important thing that we could do. And the reason is because we knew the CCK2 was going to stop working, and what we wanted to build was something to solve something that people were already having that needed to be solved. We've never had an MSI officially from Mozilla. It's the only MSI has been provided from FrontMotion. So when I was looking at the problem that needed to be solved, MSI was not the problem that needed to be solved. Management is the primary problem. If we get, if this takes off, right? If the work that we do is something that we see people using and we, you know, everybody's like, woohoo, we're going to use Firefox the Enterprise, we're certainly going to be looking at the MSI. And that's certainly next on my agenda, is to start looking at MSI once we've gotten over this hurdle. But it's not as simple as people think it is. And anytime we've talked about building an MSI, people complain that it's not enough. Like, we've had ideas on how to build a simple solution to this, and then people complain about that. So it's really a situation where we don't think we can build something quickly that satisfies people's needs. So we need to spend some more time looking at it. And on top of that, MSI is an old technology. Like, people don't realize how long this stuff's been around. And so finding people that really understand it and know how to work with it is non-trivial. So that's the other thing. It's a learning curve for us to figure out how to even do it. But I will certainly tell people that it's not that we weren't interested in doing it. It's that we had a very short window. We were aiming at ESR 60, and the thing that we knew we could do and hit ESR 60 was policy support. So, as a matter of fact, it's probably worthwhile doing an MSI article so that we don't keep getting the question. So maybe I'll do a support article called "Why We Don't Have an MSI."
Yes, please.
Yes,
because SEO will find it,
yeah,
right?
I'll do that.
And then people could link to it and say, hey, that's Mozilla, rightly or wrongly.
Okay, so the two things we talked about is why don't we have an MSI and list enterprise policies.
Oh, I found it, and I put it in this document. I found, did I copy and paste it? Oh, maybe I didn't. I found the article that you're talking about. It's just 6 different policies that are not in rapid release.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very many.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make a note of that, and that's a great idea. Anything that we can get to stop people from asking that question. They ask it like we don't know. Like they
of course.
Think, oh
it's
my
the
goodness,
internet.
we never thought about doing an MSI.
It's the internet.
So we have about 5 more minutes until the top of the hour. I'd like to open it up to those in the room or those that have been watching. If there's any other questions that we didn't cover, if you have any, looks like Noah added a fun question, but you just answered it. So thank you for answering that question. So does anyone in the room want to ask any other questions about Firefox user, maybe how your day's going, terrible internet jokes and those?
I got a question for Mike regarding, I checked a little bit the README on GitHub for policy templates. And do you feel that people with, I see you got block about add-ons that can be set to true. Do you feel that people could start using this to distribute malware web extensions and making it very difficult for users to start removing this?
If we determine that a policy is being misused, we will immediately move it over to being an enterprise policy. That one in particular, I don't see a problem with that. Now, we've already seen in the wild people coming up with other ways to prevent uninstalling add-ons, like they're using user-chrome.css to hide an add-on in the add-ons manager. So I think stuff like that is more likely, because what you'll find is most of the people that are doing evil things are trying to make it subtle so the user doesn't see what's going on. And if you block about add-ons, it's going to be really obvious that you blocked about add-ons. So I think what we're trying to keep an eye out for is the subtle things that people can do when you don't realize things are happening. And by the way, one of the things we're going to be working on for the next release is we're going to have an about policies web page, which you'll be able to go to and see if policies are set. So if a user has problems, we can say, go to about policies, see if something's set, and it'll tell you how and why it was set. And if we start to see a problem, an user can easily see what's happening.
Awesome. Thanks.
Can I also ask about a particular policy? There is a disable refresh. I think there are also situations when Firefox kind of detects that started with slow and offers a refresh, or that a profile is old, is discovered by this single policy, or
so.
Because I think enterprises
the reason that
rebuild a profile and then it's get detected as old, and users.
I agree that there are situations that's needed. We've had specific requirements in the past, because the problem with it is that it can uninstall things that an administrator chose to install. What might be useful is for us to, is to put a disclaimer on that policy, because now that we have a policy engine, that you don't necessarily need to disable refresh as much, right? Because even when the new Firefox comes in, it's going to get all the policies back. So what we're doing is for some of the policies, I've actually said, try not to use this, like disabling telemetry. I have a disclaimer saying we would encourage you not to do this. Because if you disable telemetry, we don't know you're using Firefox, and we use that data to make decisions about the future of Firefox. So I'll add a nice disclaimer to that policy saying don't do this if you don't need to. But we've definitely had, the main thing is it uninstalls add-ons, right? And some people were concerned that it would uninstall customizations that were added. What we should probably do is verify that when you do a refresh Firefox, all the policies get reapplied. And that's probably worth testing.
Sorry, going back to the previous thing, about policies will be in ESR 67?
ESR 67 probably, because it's not going to make it into the product.
Yeah.
We'll see if I can get that one into the ESR early. I doubt it, because it's going to involve translation and other things. So that's probably a 67.
So that's a more convenient way to see what policies are turned on, if any are turned on at all,
yep.
etc.
It's similar to something that Chrome does. So that's why we're doing it. And the other cool thing is you can export it, like you'll be able to export it as a text file. So if somebody needed to give you that as a support thing, they'll be able to give it to you, and then you'll be able to see what policies were applied.
Awesome. I'm checking IRC and I don't see any questions there. Let me check. I don't think YouTube comments are enabled. If there's any other questions, what's a good place to contact you if there are any questions in the future, or is there a best way to?
I'm on IRC or Slack or as Kaply, so I'm easy to find. I'm always around. So any questions you have on this stuff, don't hesitate to contact me. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, so I kind of probably know about any of the situations that people are going to run into. So I would highly recommend you not spin your wheels on things without contacting me, because chances are it's already been known. So
you are Mike. You are Toronto?
No, I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, sorry. You're in Austin, Texas. Yes. The IRC channel is.
Well, so on IRC, I'm saying you can reach me on IRC. We have not set up an enterprise IRC channel.
Oh, okay. I thought you had one. I just assumed you had one.
But now that you say that, hey, you know what? We did set up an enterprise IRC channel. It's just me and Felipe. So yeah,
okay.
Let's just say that there's an IRC channel called Enterprise now that I'll hang out on.
Yeah. So if you're Austin compatible hours, you do Slack IRC. If you're a local employee or Indian volunteer, you can do Enterprise Slack. If you are semi-private or just brainstorming or venting the mailing list, if you have an actual question that you can wait, then support.mozilla.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, can I give a quick shout out to Mike and Felipe for working on this ESR stuff. Mike has been on this enterprise stuff forever, so he's the master of this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, like I said, he is the understated guru of this all. And I know Felipe is probably a guru now too. Don't know his background at all. But yeah, awesome work, and I look forward to further iterations.
And the other thing is, I'll just say is I will be in Mountain View next week. So if anybody, I mean, there are a few local people, so I know I'm going to chat with Rachel. So if anybody wants to meet me in person, obviously, hopefully we'll get to see some folks at the folks that'll make it to the All Hands, and maybe we'll try to have a little enterprise get together or something.
I believe 2 of the people on this call are going to the All Hands. And maybe 3 or 4. I just can't count.
And I am trying to have a sticker made. I'm working on that. I'm coming.
Are you going to have a session at the All Hands that's open, Mike?
I'm sorry?
Enterprise session at the All Hands in San Francisco?
I do not have plans for an enterprise session right now. I'm waiting for schedules to kind of fall out, and then we'll see if it's worthwhile doing it.
Yeah, we all do it in the last minute, but you sort of will have some time set for cross-functional, like SUMO people to talk to you. And
yeah, I definitely like to have a chance to at least have an hour or so where people can come by and ask any questions and talk about things.
Perfect. Okay.
Now there's more in Firefox 60 than just enterprise. All right, what else is there?
Philip knows. We have a whole thread about that. It's just business as usual.
Yeah, read only. I have a practical question for the SUMO admins. I'm trying to move over a question from the Firefox support forum to the Firefox enterprise forum.
You can't move it?
I don't have it available. Do I have to be admin in the other forum as well, or not moderator? Or, okay, we don't know.
Can you share the link and I can confirm?
Yeah, we
whether
also
or
have
not
a few questions in the enterprise forum that need to be moved over to the Firefox forum too. I think out of the 4 questions, 2 of them are enterprise that we have right now. So.
Yeah, share the links, and Rachel and I will do our best to help you. Well, Rachel should be
I've
able to
put it
help
in
you.
the SUMO channel. Maybe see if you are able to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to edit details. It looks like no. The product isn't listed. It was a couple days ago, so we should look into that.
Okay, we'll look into that. We got till Wednesday. Release date is Wednesday, not Tuesday.
Yes, because of a holiday on Tuesday, yes.
Yes. Is Felipe in Europe?
Felipe
No,
is
it
in
is.
Venezuela.
Oh, Venezuela. Okay. Awesome. I just know when I find out the obscure countries that we have people, it's quite, not obscure, but the many countries that we have, it's quite hilariously good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I can't access the admin dashboard anyway. It takes me to autocomplete. So maybe there's some work going on the
I would file a bug, Rachel.
on the site right now.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. You can move questions from enterprise to
We should be able to. So that's a
desktop,
bug.
but not the other way around. Okay, yeah, we'll file and open a bug for that. It's like we found a great test case for. I'm glad we found it before the release. Hello, our team. Any other questions before we call it a Friday? I don't see any questions in IRC or in Telegram. If we missed you, please feel free. You know how to contact and Kaply now, as well as any of the admins or those of you that are on this call. It sounds like you're all in IRC. Do not be shy. This community is awesome, and if you have any issues, please feel free to reach out, and we can take the steps to continue to make it awesome. So thanks so much for your time. It was really great to have you. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, Roland. Thank you, Sibian, Philip, Constance Slayer, Noah, for your time. It's always appreciated. You do amazing things for the Mozilla project, and I can't wait to get started working together. So,
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Happy weekend.
Bye-bye.
bye, guys.
May the 4th. May the 4th.